So the unit we'll be doing today is Unit 13, which is Equality and Diversity. And we're going to be looking at Learning Outcome 4, which is the final learning outcome before your assignment discussion. And in the last learning outcome, we looked at being able to promote equality and diversity and value diversity. And here we're looking at how to help others actually promote equality and diversity. So there's a link between how we did it in last week's session and how we help others do it as well. So in the last session, which was learning outcome 3, we looked at how to promote strategies in the classroom in regards to things like, you know, the activities we look at and, you know, make accessible. When we write materials, make sure that the language is not sexist or discriminatory or any sort of racist remarks, because that identifies that, you know, there's forms of discrimination there. We also looked at the policies and procedures and why they're so important in regards to promoting equality and diversity within a school, and providing resources. Why do you think it's so important to provide a variety of resources for a diverse culture of people? Why do you think it's so important?
Well, I think you know, that's you've kind of answered the question really, is because you've got such a diverse group of people that's going to have individual needs that need to be attended to. So it's good to have a few you know, different ways of approaching these issues that need to be sorted.
You know, try to provide handouts that are, you know, user-friendly for people with different learning needs. And obviously, you know, disabilities and stuff like that, you need to take that into account.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
also, it's really important. And I think sometimes people don't realize the impact it has on individuals, especially if you've got people with, you know, hearing impairments or visual impairments, and how you communicate to them is really important. And it's really fundamental, you know, that you develop like a communication with them, so that, you know, it doesn't, there's no barriers in the communication, because, you know, you need to be effectively communicating with individuals, especially if they have hearing losses. And we discussed this in the last session, you know, visual impairments, you know, make sure things like positioning and lighting, make sure that, you know, if you've got any sort of, if they've got hearing losses, maybe lip reading as well, sign language, non-verbal cues like facial expressions, body language. It's really important. You know, body language does, you know, play a big part in a lot of things, both in schools and outside in the workplace. Speak clearly and slowly. And if there's, you know, there's any sort of listening devices for them, you know, we also went through what kind, you know, if there's listening devices, and make sure you're patient. Being able to listen to someone's really important, you know, and sometimes patience is, people don't always have the patience, and it's not just, you know, sometimes I don't, you know, like it's difficult, you know, in a situation where you've got someone who's got, you know, special needs, and, you know, you kind of are saying something repeatedly, you know, you've got to have so much patience in that job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and you know, I have a special need niece, and she's 31, and sometimes my sister, and I just feel so sorry for my sister, because I say she's spent 31 years with her, and she's had that patience. And I sometimes, if I spend 3 hours with her, it's like, oh my God, I'm tired, you know, and you know, I can't deal with that all the time. But having a look at my sister, she's dealt with it for 31 years. So, you know, she's really patient. You know, she's that kind of person who's quite patient, but sometimes she does lose her record. Sometimes she does, because she just says, sometimes I need a break. I need a break, totally a break. So, you know, sending her away to special school, you know, send schools and stuff like that, do help give her a break, you know, because it's so hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Children with dyslexia, dyscalculia, and that dyspraxia that we said talks. It's very, very hard sometimes to be able to, process information for them and for you, as an individual. So I think having that is a skill. I personally think it's a skill in itself. Patience is a big thing. And having to do that with people with special needs, it's difficult, but it's challenging. But there are people out there that are quite, patient and would take it, a day at a time and, deal with it. And, are able to deal with that. And again, we looked at, communication strategies for English as an additional language. And that's another hard thing, teaching English as an additional language. I remember teaching it a long, long time ago in Skipton. And I was teaching it in a community centre. And every time I'd teach it on a Saturday for 4 hours, I'd come home with a headache. And the reason was it was really hard work to try to get certain English words across to someone whose first language is not English.
Yeah.
It seriously, honestly, and I spent 8 weeks with one girl, and then I had to say to my colleague, I said, "You need to deal with that. I can't go past F. I'm on A, B, C, D, E, F, but it's such a challenging job, and I admire people for doing it, because I think, it's that patience, they have, and being able to provide that positive reinforcement that they'll be able to do it, and I did do it for years whilst I was at university, and I did enjoy it, but I just felt like it was quite tedious, and quite a challenge for me, to be honest, because I'd just gone into teaching quite new, and having that patience is a big thing. And for Patricia, I admire her for working with children, from SEND, because behavior issues and things like that, because it is quite hard. So learning outcome 3, we looked at the different types of strategies and things we used in understanding how to you could promote equality and now we're going to look at how to help others promote equality and diversity. And it's really important because it's that you help others promote it as well. So 4.1, describe actions by individuals which can undermine equality and diversity. So what actions can undermine equality and diversity? So we have things like, direct and indirect discrimination. Stereotyping is a big one. And I think we all do it, it's something that we all kind of sometimes don't realize that we do it, but we all do it. I mean, I do it within my family, I don't realize, and I'm thinking, oh God, I've just kind of, said something that's stereotyping someone. Bullying is another one. Harassment and not being inclusive and ignoring learners' needs. So it's really essential that at all times any sort of staff within the organisation, within the education field, are professional enough and to promote any sort of equality and diversity. And the whole reason behind it, that is to kind of make sure standards are followed, within an organisation. And these standards are not only defined but by like policies and things like that, but also some standards are enforced by law, and that staff and students must adhere to, things like the Equality Act, not discriminating against anyone, and looking at, when you also make a joke, sometimes you need to be quite mindful that the joke that you make doesn't undermine any sort of equality or diversity, aspects or impact on any sort of cultural aspects. We don't realize sometimes we make jokes and, we watch programs that have historically been quite discriminatory, but if you look back at it, in that time it was normal to watch something like that. There wasn't, there wasn't anything hidden around it. And there is programs that I did used to watch that were quite discriminatory, but looking back at it now, I still think they're quite funny, and it's a joke, to be honest. Yeah, things like you have Only Fools and Horses, and you'd have things like oh, what was it? There was one program where they were all from a diverse culture from different countries, and they were teaching them at schools.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Mind your language.
Yes, yeah. I
They
used
used
to
to,
watch that. I used to love it. And
yeah,
do you know what?
they used to show it in South Africa, and well, probably no surprise there. And I remember watching it as in South Africa, but yeah, looking back on it, it was so cliche, wasn't it? Stereotype.
I thought it was really good. And the way that the teacher was quite, quite demanding on things and how they pronounce things. I just I didn't, at that time though, historically, I didn't see it as a discriminatory thing. But if you look back
No.
at it now, you'd think people would think, oh my God, that's awful. You shouldn't be watching things like that. But then I don't think the awareness was there, culturally, we didn't have that awareness. And also, I think, there wasn't huge impacts on equality and diversity, whereas now, it is part of the law, and especially in, in a professional manner, we have to be mindful of what we say and how we say things, so we don't, discriminate or offend anyone again. So describe 4.1, describe actions by individuals which can undermine equality. So we've got direct discrimination and indirect discrimination. So direct discrimination can be things like, someone discriminating you on your based on your age, and that's quite a big one. If you're going for a job, and I did have a student yesterday that, actually not a student, a friend of mine, who said to me, I've applied for a coaching job, but one of the aspects, because he was a deputy head, and he said, one of the things, I think I might not get it, Shaz. And I said, oh, why? Don't worry, Graham. And he said, oh, no, I don't think I'll get it because I think I'm older, because of my age. And I said, well, if they discriminate you on that basis, then obviously they can't do that, because if you've got the, professional capacity, but you've got all the qualifications and everything, you can do your job. So, and he was quite reluctant to apply for a job because he thought he'd be discriminated on the basis of his age. But it does happen. People are like that out there, that would think that, I won't apply for a job because I think I'm going to be discriminated based on my age.
Yeah.
It does happen. It does really happen. Disability is another one, that really puts people off applying for jobs, and, individuals, which is a quite big one. Gender reassignment is another one that's quite a huge area which people are quite reluctant. Marriage, civil partnership, pregnancy. There's lots of laws that are coming into place to protect, things like women that are pregnant and maternity pay and things like that. So, and there are laws being introduced to provide that protection. Race, religion, and gender, and they're quite big protected characteristics under the Equality Act. When you've got indirect discrimination, you can have indirect discrimination based on your age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage, race, religion, and gender again, and they are all protected characteristics. What are protected characteristics when we talk about that? Is it something that's within the law?
Yes, yeah.
So if you were discriminated, Adrian, on the basis that you went for a job, and you were discriminated on the basis of your religious beliefs, yeah, would that be direct discrimination?
Yes.
Yeah, because it's a protected characteristics, you're able to, put an action in under the Equality Act and say, they've breached this. And a lot of these forms of discrimination happen, everywhere, either within schools or within workplaces and things like that, and they do happen. And we try to, sometimes, and I say organizations try to brush it under the carpet, and they do, but there are organizations out there that do discriminate against, and predominantly, if you think about a building site, a construction site, predominantly a male-dominated job, and then you have a receptionist in the receptionist area, and should probably, you know, there'd be forms of discrimination there, because there'd all be banter about any, you know, women doing this or anything. So there's forms of discrimination that happen within a lot within any organization, and you know, you as an individual need to be able to recognize that. I mean, historically, when in about 25 years ago, when I started working for law firms, I was young, just come out of university and stuff, which I'm not young anymore, but come out of university, and then I'd work for a firm, and they used to always comment on my clothes.
Really?
Yes, it was a male-dominated organization, a law firm, and they got shut down because there'd been incidents where they'd been discriminating not just the workers, but there were forms of, you know, religious discrimination where they'd, you know, like the month of Ramadan, they would bring in bottles of alcohol. It was a law firm, you know, and it's something that you'd least expect, but they did eventually get shut down. And they got struck off as well. So there were lots of things that came out of that. Harassment of female workers. And because I was young, I assumed it was normal, but there were comments on how women were dressing, how they looked wearing them dresses, you know. So it was quite difficult to work in that predominated male-dominated kind of organization. But being a law firm, they should have been really, really reluctant to make any sort of comments, because, you know, the law has been there for a long time on discrimination.
Yeah.
So, sorry, what was that? What was that? Sorry.
I said very often it's like sort of embedded in the culture of the business, you know.
Yeah. And sometimes, like I said, you know, sometimes people don't realize what they're doing is discrimination. They may think it's just a normal thing to do. So what is direct discrimination? This is when one person discriminates against another because of the protected characteristics, and that's what we said: race, religion, age, gender, where a person treats one less favorably than treats another. Indirect discrimination is when arrangements and rules are set in place for employees that may be unfair to a certain protected characteristic. This would be unfair on employers, but not all. So such as hiring for a job and asking for 10 years experience. This is indirect discrimination based on age. So, you know, it does play a big role in it. 4.1 again, describe actions by individuals which can undermine equality and diversity. And we've got direct, which is age. Some examples. So this is like only hiring young graduates or wanting 10 years experience. This will enable older persons to not apply. And that's what my friend was saying yesterday, Graham. He was saying they would take a young man or a young woman for this job rather than give me the job. And I said to him, don't worry. I said, you know, apply for it. And, you know, if there's any form of discrimination, you can challenge that. But that was his reluctance. There were two things, and that was one of them. And he was quite reluctant, but he's very good at his job. He was deputy head for a school, but kind of left because of the stress and things. But I said to him, apply, and if it, you know, based on, you know, if they do discriminate against you, then, you know, you can challenge that. Another form of direct discrimination is not hiring someone in a wheelchair and only hiring like able-bodied persons, which does happen again, because some organizations don't want to cater for disabled people. They don't want to provide ramps, which legally they should be doing. They don't want to provide the facilities under display. You know, if you discriminate against disability, it's a huge thing. You know, as an organization, you should be meeting the requirements of, you know, disability discrimination should have been gone years ago. You know, you should be providing these facilities, you know, ramps, and if there's any sort of facilities on like hearing aids and things like that, you should be providing them as an organization, and you should be that should be in your policy. Again, another one is not gender, which is not wanting to hire a woman with children. And I think that's a big issue at the moment as well, you know, the flexibility hours and childcare issues and things like that. Some organizations do discriminate against people that have children, and I think it's so unfair that we live in a society like that, because, you know, you can't prevent women from having children, can you? If they want to have children, they're going to have children, they have families. So that would mean that you wouldn't hire a woman who's the same level as a man because she's got a child. Again, discrimination. Indirect discrimination is hairstyles, headwear, corons, afros, turbans, headscarves not allowed. So that's indirectly. Jewelry, so no jewelry allowed. This could discriminate against religious jewelry. And that was a case with British Airways where the lady, she was a stewardess, air stewardess, and she got discriminated because she wore a cross.
I
She
remember that.
challenged yeah, she challenged that with British Airways, and she actually took that further and won the case because it was a religious jewelry. You know, and she was, you know, she had to wear it. There's lots of cases with the issue around the headscarf, which is quite a big thing within schools, and how you know, people are discriminated against wearing a headscarf or turbans again, you know. So there are different indirect forms of discrimination again.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
yeah, a stereotype is another one where is kind of generalizing a group of people. So it might be someone from every person of a particular group. So, you know, for example, an expectation that a group's personality preferences or abilities, it could be like, for example, boys are naughty. That's quite a big stereotypical, and girls are weak. That's quite a big stereotypical thing that a lot of people do. You know, boys are kind of stronger than girls, you know, and girls are weak. So that is a stereotypical image of someone. Um, and it's a generalized opinion, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Inaccurate, and it's sometimes accurate, but not always accurate. It's an opinion of a group which can be false or a majority or minority, and they can, you know, you can have positive stereotyping as well as negative stereotyping, but you know, it could be, you know, a group of people. Can you give me an example of where, like I said, boys are naughty, girls are weak, and some examples of stereotyping? Is there any other examples you can give me?
That I know it's not so much here, but the one in America where they say, like, you know, Asian people are bad drivers.
Yes.
It always it always comes up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In like
Yeah.
sitcoms.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's one that does come up in America. Yeah, it does a lot.
Yeah.
And you know, it does identify that, you know, people, we all are stereotypical sometimes, you know, and we do you know, make maybe negative, sometimes positive things, but we do say it sometimes. You've got
Well,
bullying.
like Asian people being good at maths.
Yeah, yes,
Is that
yes, yeah, yeah,
is that a
yeah,
positive
yeah,
stereotype?
yeah, it is. Like I always say that
It
you
sucks
know,
if you're Asian and not good at maths, though.
yeah, yeah, they are. I always say that Chinese people are so intelligent, and I have the stereotypical image of, and they're workaholics. You know,
Yeah.
you have the stereotypical image. It may be positive, it may be negative, but it's not trying to say anything that's discriminatory, but more of an opinion. So it is sometimes, but dependent on how people take it. So the other one is bullying is the use of force, coercion, hurtful teasing or threat, aggressively dominant or intimate. The behavior is often repeated and habitual, and it's often repetitive. So it's a pattern through ongoing actions or pattern of behavior, and it causes, you know, different psychological, physical, and social harm. So you know, you need to make sure that, you know, students don't go through that as well, you know, from bullying, because it's quite harmful on the individual itself. It's not, it's important to remember that when you talk about bullying, that it's not just a kid's problem. Many adults in the workplace face it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um, you know, it could be anything, you know, people are, you know, in the workplace based on maybe their gender, maybe on if someone's, you know, transitioning, maybe, you know, they would get bullying from someone, you know, in regards to their sexuality, You know, it could be on the basis of your religion or your religious beliefs, you know. So there's loads of examples in regard to bullying, and it does happen within the workplace. And, you know, there has been instances where people have taken individuals to court because they've been bullied by managers or co-workers or anyone in the basis, or someone on a higher hierarchy to them, but has been bullying them and, you know, intimidating them in regards to, you know, discriminating them and, you know, being quite intimidating and quite, you know, abusive towards them. You've got harassment.
Absolutely.
I think it happens a lot within the workplace as well. And I think if you're quite timid and you'd take a lot of it, but it doesn't necessarily, you could be quite a strong-minded person, you could still be bullied. You know, it's the behavior of the individual that's doing it, and sometimes it's a power thing. That they're able to dominate you and, you know, force you and be quite aggressive. You've got harassment, which covers a wide range of behaviors. It's commonly understood as behavior that demeans, humiliates, or embarrasses a person, and it's identified by its unlikeliness that the terms of social or moral reasonableness. It's kind of unwanted, uninvited, and unwelcome, and causes like nuisance and alarm to yourself. Examples could be things like, you know, harassment could include offensive or derogatory jokes, racial or ethnic slurs, pressure for dates or sexual favors, because these kind of things do amount to harassment, unwelcome comments about a person's religion or religious garments they wear, or offensive graffiti, cartoons, or pictures could be a form of harassment.
Yeah.
So again, describe actions by individuals who can undermine equality and diversity. And we've got not being inclusive and ignoring learners' needs. Why is inclusivity really important?
Well, I suppose it just you know, makes people feel like they belong, and you know that.
Yeah. It's really important because it makes people feel that the environment they're creating feels like quite welcoming, and they belong to and feel valued. You know, it you know, it's really important that, you know, you know, make someone feel welcome, but, you know, make them feel like they're part of this environment. And you know, listening to them is really important, you know, attentive listening. This is to exclude and rebuff a learner, to ignore their learning needs, and not to differentiate tasks according to their learning abilities, needs, or physical requirements. So if it's someone who's, you know, has any sort of physical disability, and you're not meeting their learning needs, then you're not really being inclusive, are you? You really need to meet their learning needs. And also sometimes inclusivity could, for example, be predominantly a male-dominated workplace, which can be highly challenging for female staff. So that's quite, you know, important. And you know, ignoring someone's needs is quite upsetting for the learner, isn't it? Because that learner is wanting to learn new things and, you know, adapt. And if you're not taking on board their needs, what are you doing? Are you ignoring? Are you being diverse?
No, you're not. I mean,
You're not
if
being,
someone, I think they're going to feel excluded, especially if there's a legitimate issue.
yeah. It's like, again, if you are teaching English as an additional language, an example would be them students would need extra support. And if you're speaking in a language that they don't understand, are you being diverse?
No, I think, well, yes, yeah, I think you're making them feel
Yeah.
excluded, yeah.
Yeah, you're making them feel excluded, but you know, it's really important that you are able to identify to them that you've got this kind of strong learning environment.
Yeah,
So you know,
absolutely.
sorry, what was that, Adrian?
No, I said absolutely.
Yeah. I think with the strong learning environment, you're able to avoid any sort of discrimination, but also make especially if someone is their first language is not English, make the student feel part of the group, but also make them focus on what they're doing, but also try to provide any sort of diversity within the class, and implement strategies where it helps them, try to eliminate any sort of barriers for them, because it's a learning curve for them. They're new to the language. And if you were to go to a different country and you were to learn a language, then sometimes, you'd struggle as well. I mean, I'd struggle, if I had to go to a different country and learn a new language,
Yeah.
I think if I had to adapt to it as well, I think it'd be hard for me, I think, to be honest. It's a lovely thing to learn a new language, but the problem is it's difficult, isn't it, sometimes?
Yeah.
4.1, describe actions by individuals which can undermine equality and diversity. So tips to AC, you can cross-reference this with Unit 1, which is 4.1. Also, the different points that you undermine equality and diversity, such as discrimination, bullying, stereotyping, harassment, and also look at this, then include an example of the time you may have seen this happening, and when did you address this? So is there been any times where you feel like you've actually seen any forms of discrimination or any sort of bullying or any sort of stereotyping or harassment within your workplace?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it goes on.
Yeah,
Probably not so much in my current workplace, but yeah, certainly in the past.
But you've witnessed this in previous jobs as well?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I
And
have.
is it based on the fact they're discriminated against any sort of age, culture, or was it harassment or bullying?
The thing is, I don't think it was just thinking. Well, the only one that can really pop into my
Yeah.
mind is just thinking about. We had a first aid course, and the trainer was like really inappropriate and saying some really inappropriate things that were certainly not very inclusive.
Okay, yeah.
Which was
You
kind of
do get
weird.
that, yeah.
Which
You
was
do
really
get that.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
I, I mean, I've had training courses like that, and you kind of get, oh my God, what have they just said? You get you're quite reluctant to say anything, but you kind of feel like they shouldn't have made them comments.
yeah, yeah. That's exactly
Yeah,
what happened.
it does happen. I mean, I worked within an organization that there was quite a strong male-dominated manager who was micromanaging everyone, and one of the ladies was put in a grievance against him, but she'd been bullied by him, and the way she was bullied was she was given extra teaching hours without anyone else knowing about the extra teaching hours, but he kept giving her extra teaching hours. So it wasn't the fact that she'd she'd actually gone in and said, why am I getting these extra teaching hours when predominantly everyone else should be doing it as well. It should be
Yeah.
something that's done again. And I do remember she took him to the employment tribunal, and it was bullying and it was harassment,
Yes.
and she got paid out £500,000 because she had all the evidence of when he was bullying her, and the emails that he was sending to her were really discriminatory. So she got paid out quite a huge, large sum of money.
Oh
But
man,
yeah, but I
that's a
think,
lot.
yes, it was a lot because I think she had the evidence there. But I think personally, it was an out of court settlement
Oh
because
right.
it was a huge organization that didn't want to be recognized,
Oh
and
right. Yeah.
yeah, so they didn't want to tatter their reputation, so the only form they could do was to pay her off to keep quiet, kind of.
Yeah.
And I've kind of seen organisations, that same organisation, do it to a couple of people where they've discriminated and harassed a couple of female employees. So it wasn't that there were any of them were male. It was just this manager who was, predominantly, micromanaging, but yet just picking on female members of staff. And he must have felt that he must have felt a bit threatened by them, because it was predominantly only like strong female women, but there's only so much you can take bullying, and there's only so much you can take. But the lady that got paid the £500,000 was someone who kept all the evidence and everything. So she was able to prove his forms of discrimination through a written form, where emails were sent that were quite discriminatory.
Yeah, good for her.
Yeah, and she took it that far, and she did get paid out a large sum, which was, but the fact is, I mean, sometimes, and most of the time, I don't think it is based around what you get paid out. I think it mentally affected her.
Yes, no, absolutely.
Yeah, so sometimes the money can't buy that kind of impact it's had on you. So,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, for her, I think it was more the fact that, she'd taken him to court, but because they did an out of court settlement, she settled it. But because of that, she lost all her confidence, was not able to work.
Well, the psychological impact is
Yeah, it does have a huge impact on individuals, and especially individuals that are quite, she was quite a strong woman. And then to be bullied by a man, and then I know within the organization, I don't think she was the first woman that he'd done it to. And I think he'd done it to a couple of women. And then they started implementing, policies that they would stick on the doors to say, to prevent bullying and harassment after it happened. Yeah. So, it does happen a lot. Forms of bullying in school happen quite a lot, where children are being bullied about because of the way they look.
Yeah.
That is happening quite a lot now. If a child identifies himself as, not male or not female, and identifies himself as pansexual, or identifies himself as, just an individual, he will get bullied on the basis of that, or she would get bullied on the basis of that, and I think there has been loads of instances where children have been bullied because and it's mainly at the moment it's based on your sexuality.
Yeah.
Where children are being bullied, or if you're quite timid and quite quiet and you're not going to retaliate back, people will bully you then. I mean, I don't know whether in your institution you have seen any form of, with kids, discrimination, bullying or harassment.
Yeah, I think I have probably seen it,
Yeah,
but I think I mean I hear about it more than I see it, from other teachers.
yeah. And do you think it happens more now with an individual's a child who's transitioning or is unsure of their sexuality and is changing? I believe it's quite a big. Sorry. No, go on,
No,
Adrian.
I was just going to say, I mean, I mean, I think certainly we've seen. I think when it comes to homosexuality, we've seen like massive changes. I mean, certainly there's bullying that does go on, but I remember growing up when every insult was like you're gay or something like that, or and I think things have improved. I think I think well, obviously we talked about trans rights, and I think that's obviously making a lot of headlines, and I think we probably slowly moving in the right direction.
It's a slow process because people are not sometimes accepting of it. you know, and strong Catholic believers and Islamically as well. Some people will not accept it. So, you know,
No, they won't.
homosexuality is growing.
Mm.
But I think they are at the back, you know, there are some people that are still not accepting of it.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think the thing is probably with homosexuality is that it's, you know, everyone's probably got a relative or someone they know who's
Yeah.
gay,
Yeah.
and I think whereas with trans people, it's not as widespread. You know, it's
Yeah.
more niche. Or although I do have a friend of mine whose the son transitioned into a woman. So that's, you know, that's the only real connection I have on a personal
All
level.
right, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, it is, yeah, I don't know. I suppose
It is interesting though that to see
Mhm.
people's perceptions towards it. So
Absolutely.
4.2 is recommend modifications to systems and structures which do not promote equality and diversity. So recommendations would be things like challenging negative attitudes among students, you know, trying to provide positive attitudes, avoid stereotypes in curricular resources and examples. So avoid, you know, putting things in that will stereotype an individual or stereotype boys or girls. You know, try to move away from generalizing things as well in examples and resources, setting clear rules regarding how people treat each other. And that's really important within schools, but within an organization as well. If you have a clear setting of rules and how you should treat people, then everyone should be following the policies and regulations in place that treat individuals fairly, you know, and don't discriminate against anyone. Treating all students and staff equally and fairly. Creating an all-inclusive environment for students and staff, so making the environment, you know, safe place, but a welcoming place as well. Challenging bullying and harassment, and sometimes we kind of hold back a little bit on challenging this, but it's really important that we challenge it and try to prevent it, because if we don't challenge it, it'll still keep happening over and over again. So, you know, we should be the individuals that are challenging it, but also if we see it happening, we should address the issue and follow the right protocols to, you know, try to, you know, challenge it, but also try to implement the policies. Again, ensure policies reflect the needs of the organisation. So you have policies in place for bullying, harassment, you have policies in place for discrimination. Make sure you're following the policies, because then policies are there to be followed. And there are laws in place that, you know, Equality Act in regards to, you know, treating everyone equally and the protected characteristics, they're really important. So make sure you implement in the law as well. Tips to AC 4.2. So here you can use the example you included on AC 4.1 and make recommendations to reduce these problems and issues. For example, staff refusing to help a soiled child who may be known as difficult to deal with. Radios in close proximity may be an example. Easy access to spare uniform. Training to challenge discrimination. And I think that's a big one where a lot of organizations do train people to, you know, challenge any forms of discrimination or anything. Having extra staff on duty to help out with these situations. So, you know, trying to have staff there that will help support and guide you through this is really important. And having extra staff there, you know, always teachers are not always, you know, able to do certain things. If you have an experienced staff there, or a staff that knows a lot about challenging behaviour or challenging any sort of forms of discrimination, you know, you should take board on what that staff is saying and try to implement that within the workplace. So today we've looked at the actions taken by individuals which can undermine equality and diversity. We've looked at stereotyping. We've also looked at, you know, bullying, harassment within the workplace, and how that's implemented, and, you know, how that can impact on individuals, but also how it can impact on students, because that's a big thing. You know, it doesn't just happen with kids, it happens with individuals. We looked at also on being inclusive as well. Why is it so important to be inclusive? We looked at the recommendations and modifications to systems and structures we do not promote, which do not promote equality and diversity. On this, we've done learning outcome 4 now. We've finished learning outcome 4. These links here are to Wikipedia, which talks about bullying and harassment. Also, the link there, which you can actually just link onto, is promoting equality and diversity in the classroom, principles and importance, and that's the CPD online.co.uk, and it talks about the issues around promoting equality and diversity and gives you examples around in the classroom, like we said, providing diverse materials as resources for individuals, providing, for visual and hearing impairment students, providing, resources for them, trying to make the classroom more inclusive, try to have an inclusive environment. So we finished learning outcome 4 now. I think the next session we've got is the assignment discussion session. Have we got learning outcome 5?
Yeah, I think there's a learning outcome 5.
Oh, we've got learning outcome 5, and then we've got the assignment discussion session. So have you got any questions, Adrian, before we finish this session?
No, I think that's pretty straightforward.
Excellent. And I have done the assignment, and what I'll do is I'll email that to you. I'll get your email tomorrow, and I will email all that to you, okay?
Oh, thank you very much, Shazia.
It's okay. It was lovely seeing you, speaking to you this week, and I will see you next week. Have a nice week.
You too. I hope you feel better soon.
Oh, thank you. I'm always ill, though. I've got quite a low immune system, so I'm always ill. So anyway, nice to speak to you. I'll see you next week.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of.
Sorry, what was that?
You take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I just said there's lots of bugs.
Oh, there's loads going around.
Care.
Loads. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. Have a nice week.
Bye. Bye.